Chasing content is one thing, but some people took it so far that it became the last thing they ever did. If you're new here, I'm Nathan Cole. Here's the 5 stories I have for you today. From a street vlogger in Atlanta who refused to hand over his bag during an armed robbery, to a graphic designer in Savannah who sat on a decorative swing that was never built to hold weight. It was October 14, 2016, in Atlanta, Georgia. The kind of night where the main streets still had movement, but the side blocks had already gone quiet. Not exactly a safe area once it got late, and most people who lived there knew to keep it moving. Reeve Morrow was 27. He worked part-time at a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, mostly loading and unloading freight. Simple, physical work on a steady schedule. Outside of that, most of his attention went into his channel, a small street vlog he'd been running for a little over a year, where he walked through different parts of Atlanta at night, camera in hand, narrating whatever he came across. Empty intersections, dim parking lots, quiet side streets most people wouldn't normally walk through after dark. That was his thing. He didn't have a large audience, a few hundred regular viewers, maybe a bit more depending on the week, but he treated it seriously. He'd invested around $3,800 into his setup, camera body, lenses, stabilizer rig, and he made sure people knew it. He had mentioned a few times on stream that going live made him feel safer, that having people watching would act as a kind of backup if anything went wrong. That belief made him more willing to take risks while filming alone. On October 14th, he was walking a poorly lit block about half a mile from a busier commercial strip. It was close to 11 p.m. The area wasn't empty, but most people were already off the streets. A few passing cars, distant movement at intersections, but long stretches where it was just him and the sound of his own steps. He was filming. As usual, camera up, speaking into it while walking at a steady pace. He'd stop occasionally to glance around, then continue narrating whatever he was seeing. Just another night of content. Nothing that felt different from the ones before it. A few seconds earlier, everything was normal enough that you wouldn't think much of it. Then, 2 men stepped out from a nearby parking lot and started moving toward him. At first, it wasn't immediate panic, just that quick mental adjustment when you notice people crossing into your path. But they didn't slow down. They closed the distance directly, cutting off the space in front of him. Within seconds, they made it clear what they wanted: the camera bag and the equipment. Instead of putting it down and stepping away, he turned the camera directly toward them, continuing to film and address the live stream even after they told him to stop. That's when one of them grabbed the strap. Reeve kept the camera up, but his voice changed. The steady narration broke into short, uneven phrases, not really talking anymore, more reacting. The live stream was still running, but it didn't feel controlled at that point, just ongoing. That small contact changed everything. Not because it was planned, but because it forced a reaction. Reeve instinctively tightened his grip, not a calculated choice, just reflex. A brief struggle followed. It was short, only a few seconds, but it escalated the situation instantly. The camera dipped during the movement, catching partial angles of the ground and nearby motion rather than anything stable. His voice came through in fragments, then dropped out between movement and distance. During that moment, one of the men reached into his waistband and produced a knife. Reeve was stabbed once in the abdomen. The shift after that was immediate. The attackers backed away and moved off on foot through the side streets without continuing the confrontation. The camera slipped from his hands during the struggle and hit the ground, still recording. The frame was mostly static now, angled toward the pavement, picking up scattered sound and movement, fading into distance. Across the street, a few bystanders noticed the confrontation as it happened. Some reacted immediately by calling emergency services while it was still happening. Others hesitated, not fully sure, until the attackers were already leaving. Only after the street cleared did anyone cross over. By the time they reached him, Reeve was already on the ground. Emergency services arrived shortly after, but his condition was already critical. He was pronounced dead later that night at a nearby medical facility. The cause of death was confirmed as a single stab wound to the abdomen sustained during a robbery attempt that escalated during a brief struggle. The case was treated as a criminal homicide. Despite witness accounts and partial footage from the recording, the individuals involved were not identified, and the case remains open. At any point in that encounter, Reeve could have just let go. He never did. Up next is one that genuinely surprised me. A young woman in Tucson who trusted an online wellness trend without questioning a single ingredient. It was March 12th, 2017 in Tucson, Arizona, a quiet residential neighborhood where most homes were already settled in for the night and the street stayed mostly empty after dark. Tiara Pruitt was 24. She worked part-time in retail and spent most of her free time creating lifestyle and wellness content online. Her videos were simple: home routines, drink recipes, and trending clean living ideas she came across on social media. Nothing high budget, just her phone, a small setup in her apartment, and whatever was currently circulating online. Over time, she had gotten into a pattern of repeatedly seeing the same kinds of wellness trends across different platforms. Detox drinks, cleanse routines, herbal mixes, often reposted in slightly different formats but always presented the same way: simple, natural, and harmless. The more she engaged with that type of content, the more her feed began to reinforce it. Similar videos would keep appearing from unrelated accounts, repeating the same ideas in slightly different ways. It created a kind of familiarity, where the repetition itself started to feel like validation, even without any clear source behind it. That's kind of how the algorithm works against you without you even noticing. Most of the products she used were ordered online. The listings looked clean and convincing, usually with general descriptions like natural blend or clean supplement formula. There was little detail about manufacturing or testing, and at least one of the supplements she used came from a seller with no verifiable source or safety certification. And why would she? It had good photos and a clean label. She was in her apartment preparing one of those drinks for a video on this day. It was a variation of a detox-style mix she had seen repeated across multiple posts, though the exact instructions were never consistent between sources. The general idea stayed the same: combine powdered supplements, herbal extracts, and an acidic liquid into one drink and use it as part of a daily routine, despite no clear guidance on how those ingredients interacted when taken together. She set her phone on a small stand in her kitchen and started recording, keeping the frame simple with herself at the counter and the ingredients laid out beside her. She adjusted the angle once or twice before starting, making sure it looked clean on camera. Even while filming, she would occasionally pause to re-stir the mixture or recenter the shot, treating it like a routine process she had done many times before. A friend was in the apartment with her while she filmed, sitting nearby and occasionally helping adjust the phone or check the framing. It wasn't treated as anything unusual at the time, just another content session like the ones she had done before. She mixed the ingredients together in a glass, stirring until it looked uniform, and talked through the steps as she filmed. The process itself didn't feel unusual to her, because it followed the same structure as other wellness content she had already made. Around half an hour later, things started to change more noticeably. At first, it was mild discomfort. Nothing immediate or dramatic, just enough that she paused what she was doing and sat down for a moment. The friend with her initially assumed it was something minor, like a reaction that would pass on its own, especially since she was still able to talk and respond normally at that stage. But over the next stretch of time, her condition didn't settle. Instead, she became more visibly unwell and increasingly disoriented, showing signs that something more serious than a mild reaction was developing. Her responses slowed, and she began having difficulty focusing on the conversation. The friend stayed with her and tried to keep her steady, initially waiting for improvement, but becoming increasingly concerned as her condition continued to worsen without any sign of recovery. There was no clear moment where everything changed at once. It was gradual, which made it harder to immediately recognize how serious it was becoming. Eventually, her condition worsened to the point where she was no longer responding normally, and emergency services were called. By the time help arrived, she was already in critical condition. She was transported to a nearby medical facility, but despite treatment, she was later pronounced dead. A subsequent review of the products involved noted inconsistencies in labeling and a lack of clear regulatory verification. One of the supplements was later identified as containing an unverified compound with no established safety data, and the combination she consumed had never been tested for safe use. Nothing flagged it, just a clean page and a 5-star review. The recording from her phone was stopped after the incident was discovered, and earlier footage from the session was later reviewed as part of the investigation. A routine built on trends she never paused to verify, ending in a fatal reaction to a homemade detox drink. In Portland, I follow a lifestyle creator's cafe filming moment turned serious after a simple phone drop pulls her behind the counter. It was March 28, 2016 in Portland, Oregon. a small, independent cafe in a walkable neighborhood where weekend mornings usually meant steady foot traffic, low conversation, and the constant sound of machines running behind the counter. Jillian Wick was 22. She was a college student and spent most of her free time outside classes creating lifestyle content online. Her posts were simple: cafe visits, daily routines, short clips meant to look casual and unplanned, even when there was usually a bit more intention behind them than it seemed. She had a habit of filming hands-free. Most of the time, she'd place her phone on whatever surface was nearby and let it record while she moved through the moment. A table, a shelf, the edge of a counter, whatever gave her a usable angle. Stability wasn't something she thought too much about if the framing looked fine on screen. If it looked good on camera, that was the whole checklist. That day, she arrived at the cafe late in the morning. It was already moderately busy. People were seated near the windows, a few standing in line at the counter, and there was that constant mix of cups, conversation, and movement behind the bar. Staff were moving between stations, calling out orders, and handling drinks during a typical rush period. She ordered a drink and shifted closer to the service counter so she could film a short clip while it was being prepared. Nothing about it felt unusual to her. It was the kind of setup she had done before in different places, just trying to capture a quick moment for content. She placed her phone on the edge of the counter, angled toward herself and the preparation area behind the register. It was slightly overhanging, not secured in any way. There wasn't anything unusual about the placement in her mind, just enough to get the framing she wanted. Around her, the counter area was active. Staff were moving between machines, customers were being served, and there was constant motion in and out of the workspace. Nothing chaotic, but enough activity that the space was never fully still. While waiting, she leaned in slightly to check the framing. The phone shifted under the angle, wobbled for a second, and slipped off the edge of the counter. It didn't just fall cleanly into open space. It slid and dropped into the back prep area where customers weren't meant to step in. For a moment, she just looked at it. Staff were nearby but busy, and asking for help meant waiting in the middle of a rush. The decision came quickly. She didn't wait. Instead, she leaned over the counter to reach it herself. No call out, no step back, just a quick movement forward into the staff area. She crossed the boundary of the counter and extended her upper body into a tight workspace filled with equipment, trays, and movement from multiple directions. For a phone. She crossed into an active kitchen workspace. For a phone. As she reached forward, her arm made contact with a large stainless steel coffee urn positioned close to the edge of the prep area. It had been set there temporarily during the rush, close to the edge and not fully secured. The contact didn't immediately topple it. The urn shifted at its base, already unstable from its placement, sliding slightly before losing balance. Once it shifted far enough, the weight distribution changed and it tipped forward. Hot coffee spilled across the counter space in a sudden release, pouring over her upper body in a large volume before she could fully pull back. The reaction around her was immediate but uncoordinated. Staff moved in quickly, some guiding her away from the counter, while others called for emergency help and reached for water at the same time. Customers turned toward the noise as the situation shifted from routine service to confusion in seconds. She stepped back from the counter, visibly in pain. Someone helped guide her into a seated position while cool water was applied as quickly as possible. She was conscious but in severe distress and remained there while staff stayed with her until emergency services arrived. She was transported to a nearby medical facility with extensive burn injuries covering a significant portion of her upper body. Her condition deteriorated over the following days despite treatment, and she was pronounced dead 2 days later from complications related to those injuries. The incident was reviewed and classified as an accidental injury resulting from a chain of events during routine activity in a public service environment. A cafe filming moment turned into severe burn injuries after she prioritized retrieving her phone over stepping back. Columbus is next, and I'll be straight with you. A prank creator who walked that same path before filming and never questioned the ground beneath him is not a story I expected to end the way it did. If you're still following along, I'll be honest, this is where the details start to matter even more. Subscribing is the easiest way to catch the next one when it drops. It was July 19, 2015 in Columbus, Ohio. a quiet residential area on the edge of the city where most afternoons passed without much going on, the kind of neighborhood where nothing really stands out until it does. Shane Lohman was 29 and not working a traditional job at the time. Most of his energy went into a small prank channel he ran online. His content was pretty straightforward. Staged public scenarios designed to look real, just long enough to catch genuine reactions from strangers. Nothing too elaborate at first, but over time, the setups got more convincing, less obvious framing, more reliance on how people would naturally interpret what they were seeing. He had a habit of picking locations that gave him the most natural backdrop. Public parks were a regular choice, enough foot traffic to get reactions, open enough to move around freely, and casual enough that nothing felt out of place until the scenario was already running. On this particular afternoon, he set up in a public park near a residential neighborhood. The concept was simple, a staged chase between him and a second person, looping through the open area near a small pond at the center of the park. A friend operated a second camera from a fixed position about 50 feet away to capture wider reactions from bystanders passing through. The park had light activity, people walking paths, sitting on benches, a few kids moving through the open grass. The pond had a narrow concrete border running along its edge, maybe 2 feet wide, slightly uneven in places where the surface had settled over time. Shane walked it briefly before they started filming, but still chose to run along the edge during the take. So, what could go wrong with a fake chase in a public park? Apparently, quite a bit. Filming started without any issues. Shane moved through the open area at a jog, staying close to the pond's edge to keep the background tight and visually interesting. A few bystanders slowed down to watch, unsure of what they were seeing. Others kept moving but glanced over as they passed. That uncertainty was exactly what the setup was designed to produce. After the first pass, he looped back to reset for a second take. Same pace, same path along the concrete border. His right foot caught an uneven section of the surface, the kind of thing you'd normally notice if you were paying attention, but easy to miss when you're focused on performing for a camera. His footing went out from under him almost instantly. No time to adjust, no time to catch himself. He dropped roughly 3 feet before the left side of his head struck the concrete border with significant force. The impact was immediate. He rolled off the edge and into the shallow water along the bank, coming to rest partially submerged near the pond's edge. The second camera captured the whole thing from 50 feet out. Several bystanders within about 20 to 30 feet of the pond saw it happen in real time. A few of them hesitated at first. The setup had been convincing enough that the line between performance and actual accident wasn't immediately clear. It took a few seconds before people started moving toward him. By the time they reached the water's edge, Shane was face down and unresponsive. Bystanders pulled him out of the shallow water and kept him as stable as possible while emergency services were called. He was transported to a nearby medical facility, but was pronounced dead later that evening. The cause of death was confirmed as severe blunt force head trauma from the fall. Footage from the second camera was reviewed as part of the official assessment and documented the full sequence from setup through impact. The incident was classified as an accidental death and the case was formally closed. Shane built his whole channel on making things look real. He just didn't account for the one thing that actually was. This next one out of Savannah is one I honestly didn't see coming. A lifestyle blogger who sat down on something purely for a shot, and the structure had other plans. It was August 21st, 2017, in Savannah, Georgia, a public plaza in the historic district where tourists usually stop for photos and locals pass through on their way to nearby shops. Dana Cutler was 26. She worked freelance in graphic design, and most of her time outside work went into creating lifestyle content online. Simple clips, aesthetic locations, everyday moments made to look effortless once they were on camera. She had a familiar approach to filming. Find a location that looked visually appealing, set the phone up somewhere stable enough, get the shot, then move on. Nothing complicated. If it framed well, she usually didn't question the setup too much. Later that afternoon, she arrived at the plaza while it was still active. People were moving through the open walkways, sitting on benches, and stopping here and there for photos. The whole space is designed to be visually appealing from almost any angle, which is part of why it attracts so much casual filming. Right in the center of the plaza was a decorative swing. Not a real one, a visual feature, basically a prop. The hardware was original, never replaced, and enough tourists had messed around with it over the years that the fittings were already halfway loose. And what did she do? Sat right down and started filming. She set her phone on a small tripod a few feet away and adjusted the framing. Just a quick clip, nothing out of the ordinary for her. At first, everything seemed fine. She started filming and gently rocked back and forth to create movement in the shot. A few people nearby noticed but didn't react much. It just looked like someone using a popular photo spot the way it was often used. The swing was supported by overhead steel cable anchors attached to a decorative frame above the walkway. It wasn't designed for sustained forward and back motion under full body weight. With repeated movement, small amounts of stress began transferring through the same connection points each time the swing shifted. The first few seconds of footage weren't good enough for her. Too static. So she started pumping her legs, getting actual momentum going, not just a gentle rock, full swinging motion. She'd done it at other spots before, and it always looked better on camera. She continued adjusting the movement to get the shot she wanted, without considering how the structure was supported. For a brief moment, there was a small change in balance, a slight shift that might have felt like normal movement. She adjusted her posture without really thinking about it and kept filming. Then, the structure gave way. The upper connection lost stability. The swing dropped unevenly, and she fell forward into the supporting frame before hitting the ground beneath it. The tripod continued recording for a few seconds, but she moved out of frame almost immediately. People nearby reacted within seconds. Some stood from benches, others moved closer, and a few stepped back while calling for help. The atmosphere shifted quickly from normal public activity to confusion once it became clear this wasn't part of a stage setup. Staff from nearby businesses arrived quickly and helped move her away from the structure while emergency services were called. The response was overlapping and uncoordinated, some guiding her out of the swing area, others trying to manage the crowd, and others calling for assistance at the same time. She was conscious at first, but clearly in severe pain, and her condition worsened as time passed. Emergency services arrived shortly after and transported her to a nearby medical facility. She had sustained severe injuries from the fall, including head trauma and internal injuries caused by the impact. She was pronounced dead later that day. A later review of the installation noted that the swing was intended as a decorative public art feature rather than a load-bearing structure designed for repeated motion. Over time, repeated use had placed stress on the upper cable fittings, contributing to gradual loosening that went unnoticed during everyday public activity. There were no restrictions in place preventing interaction, despite the structure not being designed for sustained use. The recording on her phone stopped shortly after the incident began, with earlier footage from the same session, later reviewed during assessment. The incident was classified as an accidental death caused by structural failure during use of a decorative installation beyond its intended design.